Andras here. When I'm not co-hosting The World Is Wrong podcast, I'm hosting and producing the Radio 8-Ball podcast, where we answer questions by picking songs at random, like picking musical tarot cards. We've hosted musical divinations for people like John C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette, Tig Notaro, and Fred Armisen, and hosted over 200 songwriters, providing the randomly chosen answers from Inara George and Dan Byrne to Mose Allison and Alan Toussaint. That's Radio 8-Ball, all one word. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and download our app from the iTunes App Store.
I'm Larry Bishop, and you're listening to The World Is Wrong podcast.
We're here to tell you how the world is wrong. The world is wrong about Johnny Cool.
Welcome to The World Is Wrong podcast, an extremely positive podcast where we celebrate films the world is wrong about. I am one of your hosts, and my name is Andras Jones.
And I'm Brian Connolly.
And what do you do?
I'm a host.
Yeah, you're one of the hosts. It's funny, this is like our 17th episode. We still haven't figured out how to introduce ourselves. It's endearing. So we're here to talk about a film that I suggested, a film from 1963, as we said at the beginning, a film called Johnny Cool. A Henry Silva starring vehicle that I wasn't aware of until it showed up on my radar earlier this year through some nefarious means. Before we get into describing it, is there anything you want to say about this film we're about to explore?
This is a movie that I saw, I think Warner Archive put it out. I don't remember who put the DVD out, but it was always at the video store, and no one ever rented it. But I was always drawn to the box because of all the people in it, and just the fact that there's a movie that stars Henry Silva is such a rare, weird thing. Such an anomaly that happened, because that's never... Has that happened again? Usually he's, the heavy, or he's the weirdo, or he's in the background, but to have him be the star, the titular character, if you would, is exciting. And I was glad that you picked it so I can finally watch it.
And did it please you?
It did, very much so.
Oh, good. Okay, well, let's play a clip, and then let's talk about this. Let's talk about this film.
Your name really, Johnny Collini? Okay, we got a bad start. Where are you from? Chicago?
I've been there.
You know anyone?
A few people. Russ, Frank, Vito.
What do you know in Florida?
Steinman boys. You want more names?
You know mine?
Jerry March.
That's right. Oh, you make quite an impression. My friend's hurt pretty bad.
You hurt a man's friend, you hurt the man.
But that's all country talk.
I went to school in Rome. 2 years.
About the action. I'll let you know. Where do I get in touch?
I'm out at the track. I'm out there every day.
You're not waiting to see how your friend is.
Well, there's nothing I can do for him. I'm not a doctor.
You don't really care if you know me or not, do you?
Honey, I'm not buying.
You couldn't.
Then it's easy. Just forget it.
Somehow, the combination of the director of the Beach Blanket Bingo movies, a script based upon a novel by a rabidly anti-communist pulp writer, and a producer who was the bridge between Sinatra, Monroe, and the rest of Hollywood to the Kennedy brothers, resulted in a film that doesn't have any idea how terrifying it is. This is a movie to watch on two levels. The first is a film about a Sicilian gangster who comes to America to settle a bunch of scores for his boss. Along the way, he meets a great gal and kills some swell people. With Henry Silva as the gangster in a rare starring role, a pre-Bewitched Elizabeth Montgomery as the woman who gets caught up in his life before she knows what's up, and a bunch of beloved TV and comedy stars getting bloodlessly killed in hails of gunfire, it's the kind of film that seems stuck between the 50s and the 60s, which it is, in a way you can enjoy as a dated crime drama with a kitschy wink. On another level, this is a terrifying film about the Kennedy assassination. Johnny Cool came out in October of 1963, which means it would have been in theaters in November of 1963 when JFK was assassinated. In the web of theories surrounding this world-rattling event, the mob have come to play a prominent role. The relationship between the Kennedys and the mob is one that's easy to research. So here we have Peter Lawford producing a film about a Sicilian hitman running around America pulling off a series of assassinations in the year leading up to the actual assassination of Peter Lawford's brother-in-law, JFK, while his other brother-in-law, RFK, is prosecuting the mob. Now, I'm not suggesting anything conspiratorial at all when it comes to the film, only saying that the film can be watched as a cultural time capsule in a way that goes way beyond kitsch. Everything that feels fake about the film reads to me as the innocence we are always told to associate with the early 60s before the JFK assassination. And because of the black and white TV aesthetic, it can almost feel like a Twilight Zone, where the big reveal happens 34 days after the film's release. If I may, you are entering a world where Henry Silva is a leading man, where a woman we know to be a witch has forgotten her powers, a world of invisible bullets, inscrutable intrigue, and a man with the voice of Mr. Magoo. You are entering the Johnny Cool Zone. That's not a very good Rod Serling impression, but you get the idea. So that's Johnny Cool.
So, how is the world wrong about this movie?
I think I just told you. I think I did this backwards.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I don't know anyone who has seen this movie.
Yeah, me neither.
And I certainly had not been aware of it at all. And I don't know about it at all from the world of cinema, nor have I heard anyone ever talk or write about this in the world of JFK assassination theories, which there have been times when I've gone down that rabbit hole to a certain extent. And this has never come up. And as I said in my description, I'm saying that this film that came out over a month before Kennedy was assassinated predicts or is about this event. And obviously, I'm not suggesting that the filmmakers had any idea of that. But as a viewer, being aware of the timing, being aware of the story, seeing Peter Lawford's name as one of the producers, it's really hard to watch it and not think about the Kennedy assassination while you're watching it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just like there's a lot of stuff that kind of raises those alarms when you watch it. Like there's a character named Miss Connolly, my last name, a last name that's not in a lot of movies, and of course then that makes you think of the Connolly that was part of the parade in the Kennedy, John Connolly, who was in the thing, and so that was interesting. And yeah, just sort of like the way in this movie that the mob is just kind of just killing people out in the open. Just Henry Silva will just shoot someone in the street and like it just run away and get away with it. There's just a lot of weird, connections for sure.
So how do we want to approach this? I guess let's just start talking purely about the film, because there's on its own. That's what I'm saying is on its own. If you don't know anything about the Kennedy assassination and you don't care, still a gangster movie from 1963 starring Henry Silva and Elizabeth Montgomery. If that doesn't get you just sort of curious, well, then when I tell you that the rest of the cast includes Jim Backus, Joey Bishop, Mort, Sahl, Telly Savales, and Sammy Davis Jr. Have I got your interest now? I mean, that is definitely worth 103 minutes of your time. So
Yeah. And it's weird because you'd think that like Peter Lawford produced this movie that they would want to put like him in the movie or like one of the more, notable Rat Packers, but instead they went with Henry Silva, who palled around with them. He definitely was like part or like, to the side of the Rat Pack. He definitely hung out with those guys. Is Henry Silva, is he Italian American? Like what is his ethnicity? I can never tell.
Silva was born in Brooklyn, New York, of Sicilian and Spanish descent.
Interesting. All right, so he is Sicilian. Okay, so there's that. But then, the mix of like real players like Sammy Davis Jr. with Jim Backus and Elizabeth Montgomery. It's this odd, like you said, like it feels sort of TV, but then it will completely not feel like TV, and it's just. Yeah, it's just an odd feeling watching this movie because it's from the early 60s. You accept the kind of clunky TV-ness of it, especially with those actors. But then this sort of like brutality sneaks in that is very unlike anything that was on TV in 1963. That is shocking when you watch the movie and jarring.
Yeah, the way I think about it is that it's like the film has intense psychological violence put together with completely clean, not show any of the violence of physical violence. So like when someone's shot, it's almost always off screen. You hear an explosion, you hear someone scream and fall down. And then later on we find out what was brutal about that killing because of people's reaction or the way they retell it. And like, so you feel this violence, but you never see it.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at like crime films of that era, so The Killing, Stanley Kubrick's The Killing is 56, Touch of Evil is 58, Breathless is 1960. And none of those films, like all of those films are better movies. And the action, when there's violence, it looks like violence, but it doesn't feel, the violence doesn't feel as ugly as it does in Johnny Cool. Like if you watched Johnny Cool, if they showed you all the violence that they imply in Johnny Cool, it would be a brutally violent movie.
Yeah, very much so. And I wonder if it's upsetting because it has this sort of like all the sets look like sets. It looks like a cheap TV studio, which is usually a safe place. Like especially in 63, you're thinking like, oh yeah, okay, Leave It to Beaver and I Love Lucy and like Car 54 Are You and all these things. And then now you're in these sets, but you're talking about like this brutal thing that happened to you or this death or and so it's very unnerving the whole time. And it's like someone broke into a television show and started killing people. and this is a snuff film. We're watching it.
Yeah. Oh, but it also for the time, it does feature some really great shots of like location shots, like walking around New York City or LA or Chicago, like those kind of, that it also feels that has that more of that Breathless kind of feel. Or like, I'm thinking of other films from the 60s. Like, I guess it's earlier than that, but Sweet Smell of Success has some of that as well. But that like cinema verite 60s thing. So yeah, so it has all these beloved TV actors getting killed on these sets that we think of as being very safe. I wanted to connect it again. So again, looking at the crime films of the time, a year after this, we get The Killers. And that's the first film that I can think of that feels like this one.
Mm-hmm.
Which was also, I believe, The Killers was originally was intended as a TV movie, but it was too brutal, and so it got released as a feature. And I gotta feel like there's some connection between these films. Like, Was it Don Siegel who made The Killers?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he must have seen this film and been like, "Oh boy, you missed it." But if you could do this, then I could do this, and I could really do it. Like if you're gonna have implied psychological violence, then let's have a little bit more of the physical violence, and let's get Lee Marvin in there instead of Henry Silva. Although Henry Silva is pretty great. I'm so glad we have this film because of him. So, shall we break down the film just a little bit? Tell people a little bit about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it starts in Sicily in 1943, and there's a lot of violence in the very beginning. The first scene kind of sets up the whole vibe of the film. Like, if you watch the first 3 minutes of this movie, and you're in, then you're going to love the rest of it. Even though it changes, it changes settings and characters a lot. But it starts off, it's the war, it's Sicily in 1943. And Johnny is just a kid. His mother's about to be killed by a fascist soldier. And Johnny runs up and saves her by pulling a pin from a grenade on the soldier's belt. And the soldier explodes bloodlessly. And another soldier shows up and shoots Johnny's mother. And before he can kill Johnny, a partisan shoots the soldier and calls Johnny to run. And Johnny looks down at his dead mother, who, again, we don't see. We just see a shot of a motorcycle. And so to me, it's like when I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, it's so sad. That soldier shot his mom and turned her into a motorcycle. That's terrible. And then he runs to the partisans. And when the partisans offer to send him home to his family, Johnny holds up his new machine gun and says, "This is my family now." Dun, dun, dun. That's the opening of your movie. I love it.
All movies should start with a fascist blowing up.
And a kid, like a 10-year-old kid holding up a machine gun and saying that this is my family now. So then we move to the 1950s, and an actor named Richard Anderson, who those of you who are fans of the $6 Million Man will remember him as Oscar Goldman. I think he was also in Paths of Glory, right? I believe
I am not sure.
Anyway, so he's taking pictures and covering a big Italian wedding, and Johnny is now Giordano, a bearded Henry Silva in big, dark, wraparound sunglasses, sort of like Nicolas Cage wears in the movie Deadfall.
I didn't know that you spoke English so well.
You American GIs in war, I learned from them. In Sicily, always like that. From each invader, we take something. My mother could sing in Greek, French, always invaded. My grandfather, he could sing the songs of the Arabs and Moors. All of them dead now. From Germans, we get this.
How? How did you get it?
Same like GIs, kill Germans.
You're saying that you fought with the Americans against the Germans?
No. In war, you fight for yourself, for your own people. Nobody else.
But the war is over.
As long as people are hungry, there will be war.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And the wedding is interrupted by violence, and Johnny and the father of the bride are chased down by an army helicopter. It might be the father of the bride or his partner. We're not sure because he's shot very quickly and gone from the scene. And Johnny is wounded, and when the soldiers track him down, the colonel shoots him in the face. But does he? We then see the colonel take a prisoner or a soldier from an airplane, and this guy looks like Johnny, and he makes this soldier change into the clothes of Johnny's dead body, and then he walks off screen and we hear shots. Again, like, this is an intensely violent thing. They've brought an innocent person in to be killed, maybe a soldier, maybe a prisoner, to be killed so that Johnny has this cover story. And that's a terrible, like, if that was a Martin Scorsese scene, you'd see him realize it. You'd see him try and fight back and be, dragged away and beaten while he screams. And this, he just walks off. We hear a couple of shots. Okay, nice. No muss, no fuss.
I know, so it's just treated like what's for breakfast. Like,
So all of this, turns out all this was the plot of an American gangster named Johnny Collini, played by Mark Lawrence, who is hiding out in Italy after faking his own death. Collini is played with understated menace, like someone out of a Scorsese or Coppola gangster film. And he's a character who, if you recognize Mark Lawrence, you might recognize him as a character who played hoods and gangsters from the mid-30s through the 1990s.
I love him. He's great. Like, he's great in Diamonds Are Forever.
Oh, yeah.
He has the great line. He has a great line of, I didn't know there was a pool down there, after they throw the lady off the building and she lands in the pool. And he's great in Four Rooms as sort of like the, what is he, like the older bellhop? I don't really remember what he is, but he's in Four Rooms and he's hanging, he's palling around with Tim Roth for some of the movie. But he's just a good, dependable character actor with an amazing face.
Yeah, yeah. So the whole point of this was that he wanted to fake Giordano's death because, in his words,
I have a particular use for your kind of violence.
So basically, Collini makes a deal with Giordano. They should take on the name of Johnny Cool, which was Johnny Collini's gangster nickname back in the States, and to go to America and settle a bunch of scores, people who ratted on Johnny Collini. Or people who maybe used the mob to win an election and then turned around and went after the mob in a series of congressional hearings. So anyway, Henry Silva shows up in Vegas and sees Elizabeth Montgomery hanging out in a bar with a character who's coded very much as sort of like her gay friend. Like they're on a date, but he feels the vibe. Like I think even at one point Johnny Cool says to her,
Adrian, you mean the beard? No.
Are you always so vicious?
Which was this guy, and he has a beard, but it also, people who will know that a beard is also a term for a non-romantic other sexed partner to just smooth the social wheels. Mm-hmm. Anyway, this scene at the bar that he has, doesn't this have some Scorsese Shinebox kind of feeling to you?
Definitely.
Like, again, really bloodless, very, like, it's different. Like, no one gets beaten to death. But
it's that thing where it's like the guy is just being very casual about insulting Johnny Cole, just sort of like, yeah, beat it, kid. Like, you get your fucking Shinebox sort of line. And then, but a more cool-tempered than Joe Pesci and Goodfellas, then just like beats the hell out of these guys. In like, or like De Niro sort of way, like, but with hiding the brutality because it's 1963. But it has that sort of like,
and also he's got this one killer karate chop rather than like
no
he just gives him one karate chop.
Yeah,
you're down. I'm trying to trying to think of like when the karate chop thing like became a thing in movies and TV.
When was it brought from Sicily into films to use for choreography of fight scenes? Yeah.
But this show of macho violence just turns Elizabeth Montgomery on. She's just like completely excited by, and she makes a point of like saying, oh, like something like you're a real man, or like there's like she's clearly into the violence of this guy.
Yeah.
And so much so that the next day she tracks him down.
I'm 27. I grew up in Scarsdale with all the advantages. Races, dancing school, riding lessons, the whole bit. I've been divorced for about a year from a boy who grew up the same way. Well, you've seen Adrian.
Yes. So what do you do for kicks now?
There haven't been many. Until last night. I want to know you. All men look like men, but so few really are.
She ends up getting wrapped up in his world, but it's not like he dragged her into this.
No, he doesn't seem to care. It seems like he's just doing his job, and she's just like, I want to be with you, and he's like, okay.
I mean, I got some killing to do, but there's always time for a little roly-poly with a witch. So anyway, so she tracks him down. She's turned on by his violence. And then they go back to her hotel room, and he gets a call from the mobsters to come downstairs to a craps game with Sammy Davis Jr. in an eye patch. And this scene, there's so much going on. Like this movie, I'm so confused by this movie. I can't tell if it's sophisticated or not. Like, so there's this whole thing where in this craps game, the mobsters keep calling Johnny Cool boy.
Yeah.
Okay, boy. But it's the scene with Sammy Davis Jr. So there's clear, like I feel like the movie is saying these guys are racist.
Yeah.
But it doesn't quite, I feel like it doesn't quite understand. Like it doesn't connect the dots. Like they aren't being racist to Sammy Davis Jr. I mean, they are because he's in the room, but they're directing it at Henry Silva, who I don't think has the same, like he doesn't have the same cultural, like triggers around being called boy. So it's like a weird thing. It's like, you know, there's a short person in the room and you keep calling the tall guy shorty. And you're like, I guess this is an insult. But you have to be really, like, the coding is just really strange.
That might have been what it was like to hang out with the Rat Pack, you know?
Yeah.
It's maybe that they had some off-color names, jokingly or not, for other people, but they were cool with Sammy Davis Jr., you know? Like, so maybe it's a window into what that experience was like. I don't know.
So do you understand how craps work enough to understand what happens in this?
Isn't it like you... I'm so terrible at gambling. I don't even attempt it. But I think it like you roll the dice, and you have to. If you get a certain number, that's bad. But if you get a certain other number, it's good. But like, don't you put chips on don't you put chips on certain numbers, and then if you get a thing, like I don't know, I'm an idiot. I have no idea. But like,
yeah, I don't know very well.
Like
I've watched
I know he's
so
rolling
much
dice, and they're all like, "Ooh, he's rolled that dice," or "Oh no, he don't roll that dice," and that's like all they really give you in movies when people play craps.
Right, and something. Anyway, so the point is, Sammy Davis Jr. I guess is like this super shooter. Like he's this guy who they bring in to be the ringer to make sure that Johnny loses. But he immediately takes charge of the game, gets a hold of a gun, forces Sammy Davis to roll different numbers so that he wins all the money, and then leaves Sammy Davis with these mobsters. And it's again implied these mobsters are going to kill him because it's really hard to tell what he did that was wrong.
Yeah.
Like he's there, he does his job for the mob. These guys, Johnny Cool takes them all hostage, sort of makes him roll in a different way, which is all still pretty impressive. Like the guy can clearly choose which, you know, what his role is going to be, unless there's some implied thing about loaded dice. I don't know. It's really confusing. And then you just sort of see this is again, this movie that doesn't quite know its tone. Like, is this played for laughs? Like, it's sort of like Sammy Davis Jr. almost gives like a wink to the camera, like, I guess I'm going to get killed.
Well, and he looks kind of silly too. It's not like it's like with his eye patch and stuff, he's a caricature, you know, like it does feel like it should be kind of funny, but then it's not funny.
Yeah. Because he's going to get killed by these racist Italian mobsters who are blaming him for something that wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
Anyway, so while this crap game's going on, if that wasn't disturbing enough, so while all this violence is going on downstairs, the mob has sent these two guys pretending to be cops to try and get information out of Elizabeth Montgomery. And when they can't get information out of her, the mob tells them to leave her something to remember him by, which they take as a cue to rape her. So it's, trigger trigger warning. I don't like this. I don't know. Again, like with this, film, this podcast isn't quite sure where the triggers are. So, but that's that. Samantha from Bewitched gets raped by these mobsters pretending to be cops. And when Henry Silva, Johnny Cool, comes back to the hotel room and finds out what happened, we don't really see it on his face, but the music tells us that he is furious.
Yeah.
And he takes a sharp kitchen knife and heads off into the city streets. Did you notice this? He walks by an awning that says Italian Hero Sandwiches prominently twice. And I was like, oh, that's all right. That's some clever imagery. That's nice. Some cinematic language. Good job. So, and then he goes back to where, I don't know how he knows where these guys are going to be, but he finds them, and basically we see him stab them, but we don't really get what was going on. What did you think was going on in that scene?
When he stabs them?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Does he just stab them, right? I mean...
Okay, well, yeah, but then we're told after, when one of the mobsters informs the big boss, played by Telly Savales.
The boy heard him, Vince.
Well, take care of it. Don't come to me. What's so important? The boy comes here and uses a name, and uses a gun at a crap table.
The gun he used was a Beretta, and he called you Don Vincente. Now, here in the papers where they say mutilated, the men were marked, like in the old country when somebody took revenge for rape.
Rape?
Well, I sent him to this girl he was with to see what they could find out.
Yeah, and they make tricks with her? And that's why the boy mocked her.
So basically, he cuts their dicks off in the scene.
Oh, I didn't even catch that. Wow. With a kitchen knife, too.
Yeah.
Well, just like, it's like you don't, it's like, this is one of those weird movies where if you're just sort of like watching this on TNT in the afternoon on a lazy Sunday, you could very easily miss all these things because they're all off screen and they're all just kind of treated like nonchalantly. So you can think of this as like, oh, that's just like that pleasant kind of shitty version of a film noir from the early 60s. Or if you're doing what you're doing, where you're actually paying strict attention to it, you're like, this movie is very disturbing. There's very upsetting things going on, off camera. That if you're not listening to it, like you're gonna miss that. Yeah, I totally missed that. That's what happened to those guys, but that's definitely what that means for sure.
And and just like this idea, and then the last shot is him walking away, throwing his knife in the trash can, and then again there's that awning of Italian Hero Sandwiches. He'll cut your sausages, boys. The hero taking revenge for these guys who raped this woman, and like it's such a weird, like, again, when that scene happened, I didn't see anything, and then when they described it, I went back and looked at it, and you get a lot of this, like the people's reactions when they get killed in these terrible ways. Like they show this guy's reaction shot of falling away to the car and then slumping to the ground, but you don't, like, there's nothing on his face that says someone just cut my dick off.
Yeah.
It sort of says someone just punched me in the stomach and now I'm going to fall over. But anyway. So as we continue, so at this point, Johnny is definitely on the mob's radar. And they're all, well, who is this Johnny Cool? What is it? It can't be the real guy. They're trying to figure out who he is. And this is when Johnny gets called up to meet Telly Savales. And this scene, again, it feels like a movie from much later when he starts talking about the drugs and the drugs from the growers to the corporations. It sounds like it's something out of the French Connection or The Godfather.
You want names, places? How about I give you the locations in Turkey and Mexico where it's grown? Or the name of the importer in Marseille, and which of his ships brings it in? The pharmaceutical houses in Milano that process it into H. Or if that's all too far away, how about the name of the wholesale jobber over in Jersey who handles over a ton of Benzedrine a month?
You talk like a mystery story. Here we're legitimate business.
Yeah.
again, this weird sophistication about mob stuff in this movie that is not sophisticated about human stuff. Like, Johnny Cool threatens Savales, the whole syndicate, everyone, and gives them 24 hours to pay up, which is like the whole thing, to transfer the syndicate to Johnny Cool. And he walks out. And because he's bluffing like he has an army, but he doesn't. He's just one guy a guy alone. So Savales then plans to kidnap Elizabeth Montgomery and bring someone in from Sicily to ID Johnny. And this is when Johnny basically makes Elizabeth Montgomery, she's in total PTSD mode. She's just been raped by these two guys. She's in this strange fog of love for this violent man that she loves. And he makes her his partner in crime. We should talk a little bit about this, because this is a trope in films that we sort of skated lightly over this when we're talking about Theresa Russell and Dustin Hoffman's relationship in Straight Time. But this is the second time we have a woman who, for no easily logical reasons, ends up just totally committed to a violent and dangerous man who we're watching and being like, why? Like, and I'll say, I've been in enough relationships with women who went out with asshole guys or jerky guys to know that there is some kind of pull. And these are not like people who are obviously, children of abuse or something, like they're replaying some primal story like that. But, that it's a thing that many people have encountered. So I'm not just making this up, that there is some draw of the violent, alpha, dangerous guy for some women. Yeah. But we were talking about this before. Like, is this... When you watch that, do you buy it, or do you think this is a male screenwriter's idea of the way women act?
Well, it's weird because it's definitely this like toxic masculinity that's going on in this movie, and in the Dustin Hoffman movie, Straight Time. And it's like definitely like, it's not just like, oh, I like to eat meat and I'm a man. It's like, I kill people, I'm a bank robber. Like it's like extra toxic masculinity. And I watched, and I was the one I think who had brought it up on the Straight Time episode. It was like, why would you be with this crazy person? Like, what are you getting this? Is it thrilling? Is this a male fantasy that they just hope that they can like if they were just tough like this, they could get, a lady to follow them around? But like, I equally don't believe it when you watch a movie with a very slobby, shitty guy who's not masculine at all. I'm equally confused by why women fall for like Seth Rogen in certain movies too. I'm also like, why would they be with this dud? So maybe I'm just don't agree with women being with anybody, any guy. It does, none of it makes sense. Are you gonna have to get a guy who's in the middle, who's like, you're a pothead slob, but occasionally you know how to like fix a car or build a fire, but like that's maybe the ultimate man. But like this, and this, it's like, because like the first, like we said, like the first time she sees Johnny Cool, he's just beating the hell out of these karate chopping, judo chopping these guys in the bar. And it's just like, that's the guy, I'm with this guy. And it's not even like him seducing her or anything. She's just like drawn to the violence and to this like emotionalist guy. Like Johnny Cool isn't like telling jokes. He's not suave. He's kind of dead and cold because it's Henry Silva. Like, so like it's odd, especially in this movie. Cause like you can get in Straight Time, like Dustin Hoffman is charismatic in his weird little way in that movie, in the way that he flirts with Theresa Russell in the temp office or the job search office. But in this one, like Henry Silva is just sort of like, you're coming for me, like you're looking at for me, like, and he's just he's going along for the ride. She's the one pursuing him. So it's very weird, especially after Like, she pursues him and therefore gets caught up in an even more violent, terrible life than she ever intended to live, I'm sure. And yet still sticks around to continue hanging out with this guy. Very weird.
Yeah, I mean, she has like monologues in this where she's like later in the film where she's like, I know all this terrible stuff that happened, but if he walked in right now, I would throw myself at him. I couldn't help myself. You know, I mean, I've probably had crushes on some pretty, you know, on women who were not necessarily great for me, and I guess I could kind of understand that. I mean, I think if I saw them kill someone, or if being with them ended up with me being raped by two guys, I think I might.
Maybe
I don't know.
You don't know. I've never been in that position, so I can't say really. But it is interesting that the director of this movie did end up marrying Elizabeth Montgomery, so she was okay with this director who had these violent images in his mind.
Yeah, William Asher of Beach Blanket Bingo fame, and also he was the producer of Bewitched. So he met Elizabeth Montgomery on this and was like, ooh, you can almost kind of feel like this. You feel like the director, like the movie fell in love with Elizabeth Montgomery in a way that I don't think it might have if it was a different actress.
Yeah.
Like there's a way, she's really, really featured in this. And she's great. I mean, she's Elizabeth Montgomery. We love her. But she's not Bewitched Elizabeth Montgomery yet. This is kind of her breakout.
Yeah.
And she certainly impressed the director because he married her. And you can just, when you watch the film knowing that, you can kind of see like maybe her role gets expanded in some ways. And also there's a way that maybe if the director didn't love her so much, wasn't falling in love with her, I think there might be more continuity or consistency to the character, because there's ways in which she just goes between being like completely flipped out and traumatized to then like later on dancing at a party and having a great time. And like, she's just, is she a good girl? Is she a bad girl? We don't know. She's just Elizabeth Montgomery and we love her. That's all we know.
You know, fun fact, George Segal was cast as Johnny Cool but quit because of too much Elizabeth Montgomery.
Shut up. No, I heard that it was actually it was actually Ronnie Blakely and
replaced by another television star.
Sorry.
But like I think like it's weird because like I can't imagine, like it's hard for me to understand what it would be like watching this movie in 1963, because watching this movie in 2020, it's hard to shake Elizabeth Montgomery as the lady from Bewitched or Jim Backus as, you know, the millionaire from Gilligan's Island. So watching these people, these beloved people from my childhood, be treated in with such brutality is extra upsetting. Like I feel a layer of upsetting that didn't exist when you watched this in 63.
Right.
Right? It would be like if Mickey Mouse was in something and then he got raped or shot in his stomach, and then later he was in the Mickey Mouse Club and in cartoons. And then we look back and be like, man, that's rough. Extra rough now. So it's like, it just makes it all the more, like I feel it a lot. Like when those guys do those bad things to Elizabeth Montgomery, like it's, to me, like extra, like, why did they do that to the lady from Bewitched? She's so nice. This is terrible. It makes for another weird layer to this movie.
So adding the weird layers. So now Elizabeth Montgomery is basically his partner in crime. So the first third of this movie, it's just all about Johnny. Now it's like takes on this weird sort of domestic Bonnie and Clyde kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like, so she's now his partner and she goes and she's like helping by renting cars and parking them in these different places so that he can fly all over the place, killing these people and making it seem like he has an army with him while it's just him doing all the dirty work. And this is when we get to meet Joey Bishop, who's doing a commercial for he like works on a used car lot and he's doing commercial for cars.
Great scene.
And then sells the car to Elizabeth Montgomery. So that's our second Rat Packer. in the film. I guess third if you include the producer Peter Lawford. We got Joey Bishop, Peter Lawford, and Sammy Davis Jr. So I guess the sort of, no offense to Sammy Davis Jr., who I love, but from the standpoint of the time, probably the low rent Rat Packers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like if it was the Brat Pack and it's sort of like a movie with Ali Sheedy and Andrew McCarthy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe Mayor Winningham. Like they're Brat Packers, but it's not Rob Lowe and
Robert Downey Jr. and
yeah.
So
was Robert Downey Jr.? I think he was post Brat Pack.
I guess you're right. He just hung out with him. Like I guess it's weird. I always group him and John Cusack with him, but I think they were a little too young. They're kind of like the little brothers to the Judd Nelsons and the Emilio Estevez's. Rob Lowe's.
Right. Anyway, so they have this. Joey Bishop has this nice scene, and surprisingly, he doesn't get killed.
I know.
Doing fine.
Yeah,
Joey
I think that would have
Bishop
been
lives.
That would have been too mean because like that scene is one of the more funnier scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
And
he's trying to find out where Elizabeth Montgomery lives so he can go to her house. For a woman who's just survived a sexual assault, she takes his trying to figure out where she has her hotel so that he can get there in stride. But she does put him off and say, "Hey, no way, buddy. I'm driving away. I've got another dangerous man to go find." Meantime, this is when Jim Backus shows up as a character. Does Jim Backus look like a Santangelo to you? Mr. Santangelo. Jim Backus.
His laugh is the best.
So he's a business guy planning on condemning 300 feet of public street to build a boondoggle. And we start to see this thing of like, we meet someone and they're doing something sketchy so that it's going to be okay when Johnny kills them. Like it's sort of like this series of morality plays. So he's about to pull this boondoggle and he's walking these guys out. And this is one of my favorite moments in the film. On the way out, Jim Backus leads these guys out of the room talking like Jim Backus. And then when he gets past the door and we can't see his face anymore, he starts talking like Mr. Magoo. I love it. Again, the director is having a lot of fun. I feel like he's just firing wildly. Like he doesn't know what movie he's making. This movie is making itself through him. He's just like, I'm in love with Elizabeth Montgomery. I can't think about directing a movie. Well, yeah, make a Mr. Magoo joke and then let's kill him.
Let's pause for a second and talk about William Asher for a moment. Because he's not a visionary. Like he's not like, when you look at his filmography, he is just sort of like a guy for hire to do episodes of your TV show. He did this movie, a bunch of the Beach Blanket Bingo movies, and then like episodes of TV shows that I know where's the show, like the Private Benjamin TV show, and episodes of Alice, and just the Paul Lynde show, and of course Bewitched. And to make this weird, violent, strange anomaly only makes more sense when you look at his movie he made in 1981 called Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, aka Night Warning, which is one of the best exploitation movies of the 80s.
So shocking, so terrifying, so powerful. Night Warning has been named Best Horror Film of the Year by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. Billy and Julie, young, innocent, in love. It was all a mistake. They didn't go looking for trouble. They were just too curious. Without knowing, they've uncovered a deadly secret. By accident, they've stumbled onto a grisly murder. Now, they know too much to live. A chilling tale of a young boy and girl, innocent victims, now targets of a frenzied obsession with murder. See the award-winning Night Warning.
It stars Susan Terrell. It begins with one of the most violent car crashes in movie, maybe the most in movie history. And the movie is brutal and it's mean. And it's very much like this in a way where it's like the filmmaking isn't really above pedestrian. But then there's these flourishes of just like uber violence. And in that movie, it does not leave things to the imagination. Like in that movie, because it's 1981, I guess, he goes all out. It's almost like he's making these like fun sitcom-y type things, and then but within him is this rage and this bloodlust that he must unleash every 20 years in a movie. And it's just like but Johnny Cool is the better version of it because it is like a TV pilot fighting against itself to become this brutal Don Siegel movie, you know, like or a Robert Aldrich movie. And I think that's why he's an interesting filmmaker. Like his very few movies, like his last movie is Return to Green Acres. That's his swan song. But yet that guy had within him two very violent, terrifying, weird character studies. Interesting guy, to say the least.
I'm just looking up Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker. Oh. That opening car crash was... the cinematographer on that was Jan de Bont.
Yeah, which makes sense because he has filmed a few crazy car crashes because there's the crazy one in, what is it called? The Fourth Man, the Paul Verhoeven movie, has a brutal, and I believe that was Jan de Bont. And isn't there a crazy car crash in Basic Instinct? I think. Maybe I'm making that up.
He also made a movie, didn't he make a movie about a bus?
Oh, Speed? Yeah, Speed. Yeah. Visionary Jan de Bont. but that's what's crazy about like Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker looks so much better because he has Jan de Bont as cinematographer. Whereas like the way Johnny Cool looks kind of reminds me of the way Psycho looks, like in a way, like not clearly not as good, but how Hitchcock for that movie kind of took his Alfred Hitchcock Presents crew to like make a movie on the fly. And so it has that kind of like, the sets kind of look like sets. You have some scenes that have that kind of like I'm talking about Johnny Cool now, that has that, basic like wide shot close-up coverage setup. But then there's these weird flourishes in Johnny Cool, like these weird artful shots of like Telly Savales' building, or like the faces being stretched out in the mirror at the bar. Or when they go to Vegas for the first time in Vegas, like all these shots of the mirrors in the ceiling kind of distorting things. So it's like a weird, odd mix of like, close-up, wide shot, stage, the TV kind of directing to like weird, arty stuff kind of fit into it. It's like shoehorned into it.
I mean, it does kind of feel like it's a movie. It's a movie made by a not visionary director who, like, I feel like he's falling in love with the love of his life. He's shooting a film like he's a man in love. Like, that would be cool. Okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's have some cinema verite shots, but then let's also have these shots on the sets. Let's do this brutal violence, but then let's have a goofy Mr. Magoo. I'm just having so much fun on this set. Let's just. I feel like he's showing up every day and just like being like, okay, let's just go with it. And whatever. It's like, it's not like this film is going to like have incredible impact and meaning in 34 days. When everyone's going to be concerned about assassins for like, I guess for the next decade. Anyway, can we get back to Jim Backus? Because
please.
So he's walked out feeling confident doing his Mr. Magoo, and then we see Johnny Cool, and he's doing this thing with this briefcase, and he's got this whole briefcase thing going, and I'm watching, I'm thinking, oh, he's going to blow up Mr. Howell. And he meets Jim Backus in the bar at the train station, and they do the briefcase switch. And then Jim Backus as Santangelo goes and walks away, and we think he's going to blow him up in this train station. But instead, Henry Silva runs after him and was like, "Hey, you have my case. I have your case." He's like, No, I'm sure it's my case. And it's like, No, you got mine. Look, he opens it up, and inside there's a gun, and he shoots him with it. In the middle of this crowd. And I was like, why didn't you just walk up and shoot him? I did not really get... Again, it's whatever. It's movie stuff, but it was definitely a little bit of a red herring. I was expecting a big explosion.
Yeah.
Don't worry, folks. Explosions will be coming. So Elizabeth Montgomery has rented this car for him with a camera in it, and it's waiting for Johnny at the airport. Meanwhile, Telly Savales and here's Elisha Cook shows up in this film.
Yeah.
How'd you get Elisha Cook to do this tiny little role? As one of the bosses, doesn't have a lot to say, but is the most interesting person in all of the scenes that he's in. And they meet with the Sicilian they brought in who doesn't know anything about Johnny. So they're trying to figure out, like, what is this? They're still trying to figure out who this Johnny guy is. Meanwhile, Johnny drives around Vegas, early 60s shots of Vegas on the Strip. Really great to look at. There's a fun marquee for a show with Jimmy Durante and Peter Lawford. So the producer got his name in there again. Then he gets to Vegas. I think this is in Vegas. And he meets with a character named Mr. Hines. He's played by John MacGyver. And if you see him, you'll recognize him. He's another one of those character actors who was in lots of episodes. I'm sure he was a recurring character on Bewitched. And he's just one of those TV guys always playing businessmen, bankers and such. But he's a bad guy. He's shaking down this poor woman for passing bad checks. And we kind of get the idea that he's going to make her either have sex with him or work it off as a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you pick up on that?
No. I did not.
The sex and the violence in this film is so low key. You can watch it and just not even notice it.
I'm just such an innocent, I guess.
So we know Johnny's coming to kill this guy, but before he does, he's downstairs just spreading money around and flirting with these ladies. And meanwhile, we see Mort Sahl walk by as a character named Ben Morrow. And he's walking through the casino when someone recognizes him and says, calls him delivery boy. I guess, I don't know. I don't know what that's about. I guess he works for the mob. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Johnny goes upstairs to meet with Mr. Hines, who's waiting with a shotgun. And Johnny takes it and beats him to death with it. Again, off screen. Takes the gun. John MacGyver falls down. We see him smash the gun down, and we know he's dead. Again, this is just like, I want to see Martin Scorsese remake Johnny Cool. That's so in the scene when he kills John MacGyver, this is when we really get Mort Sahl's great scene.
When you have finished killing for him, he will pay you as he is paying me now. I won't be alive to pay off, but I'll lay you even money I'm right. And I'll give you a price on how long before he gets you. 6 to 5, 3 days.
Let's give a little bit of time to talking about Mort Sahl to people who don't know who he is.
So seeing him in this movie is so weird. Because it would be like if Lenny Bruce showed up in a movie like this. This Mort Sahl is known, he's not known by a lot of people, but he did this very cerebral, version of stand-up comedy. And then he got very obsessed with the Kennedy assassination.
There was optimism when Kennedy was alive. We thought everything was possible. We didn't have any tangibles, but boy, did we feel good. And that's all gone now. The Social Democrats in this country have a lot of guilt. They didn't stand up to Vietnam. They didn't stand up to the encroachment of the intelligence community, and they walked away from Jack Kennedy. The most they could come up with after he was shot in the street like a dog was to say he wasn't that good a president anyway. Yeah, let me tell you, he had a strange group of friends, remarkably absent when he fell. I didn't even vote for him. I didn't want anything to, jeopardize the relationship.
Which adds another layer. Like, he constantly talked about and referenced the Warren Report in his stand-up bits a month after this movie came out for the rest of his life.
The Warren Report was a little bit later, but yes.
A little bit later, but like he was obsessed with the Kennedy assassination and talking about it and joking about it. Very interesting that he's in this movie.
So yeah, just to give a little bit of background, in the 1950s, when, like I said, Lenny Bruce is a good touchstone, when he was breaking out, the other two sort of big name comedians who were also pushing boundaries were Dick Gregory and Mort Sahl. That was sort of the holy trio of these, I don't know, edgy comedians of that time. Mm-hmm. And basically Lenny Bruce was the sick one, Dick Gregory was the black one, and Mort Sahl was the smart one. Like, he was the intellectual, and you hear, like, Lenny Bruce does, if you listen to Lenny Bruce talking about comedy, he'll talk about Mort Sahl as being just like the comedian's comedian.
Comedians, to me, the true comedian creates everything he says. I'll give you examples of what I consider creative comics, thinking comics. Mort Sahl is a creative thinking comic. And this is how you can tell in a cafe. If you see Mort today, and then you see Mort a month and a half from now, in the hour that he's appearing on the stage, you'll see about a new 20 minutes.
So that's who Mort Sahl is. And then in these scenes with Johnny Cool, it feels like he has more soul and gravitas than anyone else in this movie. It's just this kind of heartbreaking, but not even like heartbreaking for emotion, just heartbreaking because, wow, here's this guy who's, first of all, he's Mort Sahl, so I'm watching it thinking he's just, oh, it's great to see him. But the way he delivers his lines is with just like this sad intelligence and there's no urgency to anything in this scene. Mm-hmm. So it makes you kind of think, oh, well, maybe they're going to work together. But no, Johnny just picks up a pillow and shoots Mort Sahl. And it's very sad. Why does Mort Sahl have to die? But as you said, the synchronicity is off the charts because, again, this is just like another touchstone of JFK assassination, something going on in this. So here we're coming up on one of my favorite scenes where for a second I thought we had Rodney Dangerfield showing up in this movie.
That's what my note said. I was like, who is this fake Dangerfield?
So Johnny Cool, as part of his cover, puts a bunch of cameras on and acts like a Vegas tourist about to get on a bus. And the driver of the bus is an actor. He must be some Vegas character. He must be a comedian. The guy has such a crazy face. And I mean, he does look and sound like Dangerfield. Oh, we should also mention that after Johnny Cool kills Mort Sahl and leaves, the woman who was getting shaken down for bad checks comes out of the other room and is just sort of like, yes. Well, she's not psyched. But inside she's psyched. Outwardly, she seems horrified to see all this death. But inside she knows, whew, I just dodged a bullet. I'm not going to have to sell my body on this trip to pay off my bad checks. So, boy, this script. There's so much energy just describing it, let alone having to do all this killing. Where are we at in this film? Where are we at in this film, Brian?
The bus driver.
Now, don't kibitz. We're not playing poker.
I'm not kibitzing. Get it over that line. I'm used to farmers' lazies, but these guys take the cake. Get a load of that Charlie Camera over there. He don't gamble. He's got religion. Frisk him. Maybe he'll come up with a Bible.
Oh, so the bus driver, that actor's name is Hank Henry. And he is in Robin and the Seven Hoods. He's in Pal Joey. So, like, he's definitely, like, around these guys. Sergeant 3. So he's in a lot of these movies with these guys.
With a face and a voice like that, of course. How could he not be?
And he must have been a Vegas comedian because he died in Las Vegas. So, like, why would you be living in Las Vegas unless you were working in Las Vegas?
Right. No offense to our listeners in Las Vegas. I'm sure there's a lot of good reasons to live there.
Nope.
So this is when we have this really, so finally, so basically Elizabeth Montgomery's been just hanging out in her hotel room, missing Johnny, freaking out. Where is he? Where is he? And he comes back and they have this big dramatic scene.
Intelligence is not confined to men. 3 days ago, my life was concerned with getting to the beauty parlor on time, getting my laundry ready for the cleaners, making my mind up about a new shade of lipstick. Well, there was something hidden deep in me that I didn't even know existed. Whatever it was, you freed it, and now my life is yours. And I'm telling you, Giordano, that you've got to finish what you started. Not for the man in Rome, but for yourself. Johnny Cool is a name. Giordano was a man. Be Giordano again. Do what he would do.
Why not? Why not?
Johnny, I need you. I need you right now.
What do you think of that? That scene was one of the ones that I was just sort of like, oh, this is a bad movie, but it's just like a lot of acting going on. I didn't buy, but it does fit into that trope of nice girls going after these bad men, and it being, definitely being her neuroses that makes her like she's still chasing after this guy and saying, "Take me with you." No, she's not trying to get away from him at all. Meanwhile, the mob finally gets in touch with the real Johnny Collini and they ask him if it's okay to kill Henry Silva, and Johnny Collini is like, "Yeah, go ahead. I don't care. He's not."
His work is done.
Brutality.
He killed all the people that I needed, so sure, clean it up.
And meanwhile, there's a group of government men. This is the first time we see any semblance of the law, who are hanging out in this glass room talking about a war breaking out for the control of the syndicate and their need to find Johnny Cool. Mm-hmm. Of course, at this point, Johnny Cool is tooling around Los Angeles, I believe, with Elizabeth Montgomery. She's driving as he fiddles around with a suitcase full of dynamite. And we meet his next target, another terrible, terrible person, an oil man swimming in a swimming pool, refusing to let his ex see their kids and taunting her with his power. So, he's this bad guy, and he won't let the kids see their mother, and he's clear they want to see their mother. And they even say a thing of like, he's like, "Come on in the pool." And they're like, "Okay." And one of the kids like, "I don't want to go in the pool." He's like, "Well, you know how mad he gets." So this is this bad. He's abusive to his wife. He's abusive to his kids. He's swimming in this pool. He's an oil guy. Oh boy, we want him dead. Also, we're a little bit scared. Like, is he, he's swimming in the pool. Is Johnny Cool going to kill these kids? But he doesn't. But he does take advantage right there and becomes something of a beach blanket bomber, if you will. And Elizabeth Montgomery's freaked out. She doesn't know that they're going to kill someone, and he just grabs the case, throws it in the pool, blows up the guy. The kids are not killed, and Elizabeth Montgomery is now really freaked out. She's driving the getaway car, and basically, Johnny just leaves her with the car and goes to do some more killing. And this is when she starts to kind of realize that
I've made a huge mistake.
She sees a friend of hers at a hair salon who tries to invite her, and she's like, "Just leave me alone. And then she goes out and sees the cops sniffing at her around her car. And so then she lets her friend take her to this party on a yacht. And then we see Elizabeth Montgomery. She's just another drastic shift in tone. Now she's just a happy lady dancing and drinking wine and champagne, flirting with guys. Just no respect for Johnny Cool, who she's just moments before she was hanging out with. Now she's just happy to flirt with guys on this yacht. That scene was a weird change in tone for me.
Yeah.
And finally, you know, we know he has to. Telly Savales is the big boss, and Johnny has to take him down. So in a scene which you could see in the previews, if you just look at the preview, Johnny Cool finds his way onto one of those, I don't know, those platforms that the window cleaning guys use for cleaning the windows of high-rise buildings. He gets on one of those, and he's super cash. He's just sitting on it, taking like tourist shots of the city, maybe to send back to his friends in Italy. And then when he gets to the top, he turns around, pulls out his machine gun, and shoots Telly Savalas through the window. The most bloodless and goofy of all of the deaths. Telly Savalas is a great actor, but he is bad in his death scene. Right? He just sort of like, he looks like a kid playing cops and robbers.
Definitely hit with some invisible bullets.
Yeah. Then, I mean, we're coming in basically on the end of the movie here. Johnny has a plan to meet with Elizabeth Montgomery at this restaurant in New York. And when she wakes up on the yacht after this night of dancing and drinking and flirting, she realizes, what have I done? They call the authorities. But before that, she lets the mob know where they're going to be, where they're supposed to be meeting. So Johnny is walking into a meeting where he's going to get kiboshed. Meanwhile, her friends are trying to help Elizabeth Montgomery to sort of play the victim in this, but she is ready to turn herself in. And in a really quick wrap-up, Henry Silva gets taken by the mob, put in a straitjacket, and is fighting all the way to what we imagine is going to be his death, but we don't really see it. It's just sort of like, okay, this guy we've been spending the whole movie with, he's going to get killed by these mobsters, but we don't really know exactly how or why. Did you get a sense of how they were going to kill him?
No, it's like so vague and lackluster. It's a very weird way to end a movie, I thought.
Yeah, like isn't the gangster supposed to go down in a hail of bullets?
Yeah, it should be like a good James Cagney ending, you know?
Yeah. In this, it's just sort of like, it's, you know, it's Chinatown kind of ending, but without the violence. It's just sort of like, well, that's the way the system wins. That's the way it works. This bad guy gets his comeuppance. Elizabeth Montgomery is good, and she turns herself in, and end of movie.
The end.
Really, like, this movie is just plowing along right up through Telly Savalas' death, and then the end just sort of has to have this weird morality tale. This movie blows my mind in so many ways. It's different, but it reminds me of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, just in the sense of being like, this movie can't be as good or as bad as it seems. It gets so many things right that you're not sure if it means to get right the way it's getting them right. And then it gets, I mean, I like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls at least has a great ending. This big ending. This film is not as good as that, but it has that same feeling of like, I just feel like it's very hard to be this bad in ways that are this good consistently. You know what I mean? Like it messes with my brain, Brian. And we haven't even gotten into really talking about, like, again, like how much this resonates with the JFK assassination and everything that came after it. We sort of touched on that to some degree. But, yeah, you talk a little bit. I've been talking too much. This film just... There's so much plot in it, and none of it makes sense. Well, it does make sense.
It's just one of those weird things of like, are the parts that we're really into Are those the parts we're supposed to be into? It's just sort of like, was this a movie directed by a guy who wasn't thinking about it as much, so the actors kind of did their thing, or the cinematographer, like all the parts, all the interesting bits? Is it purely accidental, or is this just a really smart movie, but done in this schlocky way? It's like, because I know that Beyond the Valley of Dolls is made by smart people. Like Roger Ebert wrote it, Russ Meyer directed it. Like, these are smart guys. These people, I don't know. Like, it's really confusing. It is confusing because you're like, there's so many hokey, dumb things in this movie, but then there's so many fascinating, interesting, exciting things in this movie. And like, did they intend the violence to be as troubling, or were they trying to make it clean? Were they just like, oh, if we don't show it, then hey, this movie's not as upsetting. But then it makes it more upsetting. It's like the ear scene in Reservoir Dogs. Like, the fact that we don't see it, your imagination is so much worse than anything in reality. And it has that, like, it's not just because it's about Italian people, but like the fact that, like, it does, like, the beginning feels like Godfather, like when they're in Sicily. And you're right, the parts in like the bar kind of feel like Goodfellas, or like in Vegas, a little bit of Casino. Like, it definitely, like, if Martin Scorsese hadn't seen this movie, like, I just don't believe it. Like, he must have seen this movie. I mean, he's seen every movie, right? Isn't that his thing? But
right.
like, but like, it feels like, and it's weird that it's a movie that touches on all these things, and yet neither of us had seen it until a few months ago, and nobody cares about this movie, and nobody talks about this movie. This movie's totally just forgotten about and thrown on the pile, but it's clearly a very fascinating thing. Like, we've been talking about this for over an hour, like, there's a lot to unpack in this movie.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it must have been like to see it at the time, because watching it now, you're right. There's everything about this movie that hits me is based upon things that happened chronologically after the movie. Whether it's that Henry Silva never starred in another movie, or that the Kennedy assassination happened, or that, that gangster films became such a prestige touchstone in 1963, what, Scarface, there weren't that many like gangster
up until
films.
This point, no, it was not a thing. It was like, you'd have gangsters in movies. You'd have like film noir, which had gangster characters in it. You'd have, like The Killing, but they're more like, they're not really gangsters in that. They're like robbers. So you'd have crime was definitely around, but not gangsters in the way that we think of, like Sopranos, Goodfellas, Godfather, which is clearly what this movie is about.
Yeah.
And just like the carefree way in this, which people are murdered in this movie is very weird. It's like, we keep talking about it, but like, it is, I feel like, the strangest part of this movie is like, these guys are just going all over, like, just killing Jim Backus, like, literally in a crowd on the street, and being able to walk away from that is bizarre. And then that really does lead into the whole thing with the JFK assassination of like, here, we're just going to shoot this guy in broad daylight from a building in a huge crowd of people, and like, that's very much what the violence in this movie feels like. It's just like, it's like a handshake, like, it's very weird.
Yeah. I hope we encourage people to find this film. It's not a really hard. Where did you find it?
It's actually on, I believe it was just on Amazon Prime for free. Yeah. It doesn't even have a poster. It just says Johnny Cool, no image at all. So it's just like, it's not going to appeal to anyone unless they're looking for it,
Yeah. But this, I mean, to me, it was the cast that got me, but the film, there's no other, it would be impossible to make this film if you were trying to make it, again, because so much of what's exciting about it is stuff that the film had no idea was going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, the film doesn't know that that's Sam from Bewitched.
Yeah.
But we do.
Yeah.
And that makes it really it makes it something. It not just something in terms of like who she is as an actress, but it just cements this time. Again, it's like what I said in my intro. When I watch this film, when they talk about the end of innocence that the JFK assassination sort of symbolizes, this film feels like it is just steeping in that innocence. But it's not really like, it's aware that all this shit is going on. But it's like that. It's just like it has no sense of the impact of it all.
It feels like
oh yeah, there's mobsters going around killing people, but it's going to kill your president
in a month. Yeah, it's like, it feels like it's weird because it has this feeling of innocence, but then it also feels like it's on the stove and it's starting to boil. You know, like that. It's like it can't contain its innocence much longer. You know, like it's this movie's stuck in the middle of like, here's this leftover way of how we make movies and show violence, but we're gonna like really want to show it, but we can't show it, but man, we really want to, and it's just sort of like it feels like a pot boiling. It's about to boil over.
Yeah, there's a line that Elizabeth Montgomery, whose character is named Darian Dare Guinness. Guinness. But she has, when she's talking to her friends, she's like,
Underworld. I always thought it was a word for the movies. Well, it's not. It exists. Right out there, just below it, you can see a whole world full of monsters.
And I feel like the film has that line in it, and it's there. And maybe that's it. Maybe like they're hanging out in Vegas with all these guys, and these mobsters are there. Maybe it is. Maybe William Asher as a director is genuinely sort of terrified of the violence of these people, but he just has no idea. Like, he knows that they're bullies in person and that they have reputations for doing stuff, and so they hear stories. Like, this is the whole world full of monsters. But I feel like this film is just standing on the gateway of all of those monsters spilling out into the future Nixon administration and Vietnam, and like even that thing when they drive up when Henry Silva and Elizabeth Montgomery drive up these Hollywood hills to go and kill this guy. I'm watching that and I can't help but think of the Mansons.
Yeah.
Even her, she's like a Manson girl. You know, she's like this girl who is totally into this murderer guy. Like, she's again, all of these things are proto. She's a proto Manson girl, and he's a proto whoever the guys were on the grassy knoll. I don't know. I really was looking forward to talking about this, but now that we are talking about it, I love this film even more. I guess we should also mention that it comes from a novel called The Kingdom of Johnny Cool that was written by John McPartland. And he was this famous pulp novelist who basically became successful writing virulently anti-communist literature, first for the army and then just for publishing. And again, it's in this soup of that time. Like, when you get into talking about JFK, you also have to talk about communism and anti-communism and the Cold War and whether we're ramping it up or ramping it down. I haven't read the book, but I am curious about it. Although this guy, the writer, seems like not personally my cup of tea. But
he's dead now. It's fine.
Yeah. So, anything else before we shift? Anything else to say about this film? Any closing words?
I think we did a good job doing justice of a movie that no one has really thought to sit and talk about. I'm very proud of us.
Yes. Also features a wonderful score from Billy May that you'll be hearing throughout this episode.
Ooh. The New York Comedy Club podcast is back with brand new episodes, interviews, and jokes. Take a look behind the curtain as we discuss all aspects of the comedy world. The origin of a joke, the writing process, the business side of things, and, well, things that are just funny. Get to know your favorite comedians, discover new comics, and get a first-hand look inside the Make 'em Laugh business with the New York Comedy Club podcast, brought to you by Paper House Network.
So, Andras, we can find you on your own show, the Radio 8 Ball Show, where you ask questions and you answer them by picking songs at random. And now you've been doing this thing where the questions that you've been asking have been kind of related to the episodes we've been doing, the movies we've been doing. You did one on Solo. Last week you did one on John Bryan. So what the heck are you going to ask for this? I'm guessing Kennedy related?
Maybe. I guess the thing I'm thinking about this is sort of maybe the reason I'm so intrigued by this picture is because it functions in the way that I intend Radio 8 Ball to function, in that, when we ask a question on the show and then pick a song at random and then interpret that answer, like this film, we don't know what's really happening in the world at the moment when we ask this question. Even in the world at large, and a lot of times we don't even know what's really going on in our own world. Like what's going to happen later on in the day that's going to make that question be like, whoa, I can't believe I was asking that because this other thing happened that I had no idea about. And I've had so many experiences on the show of that happening that I've come to trust that that's kind of just the nature of doing divinations, is that you get an answer and you know what it means in the moment, but give it a little bit of time, and all of these other things will be revealed.
Yeah.
And this film, like, it's almost like if you told me that they, like, every morning they got up and just threw the I Ching and used that to, like, determine how they were going to make it, that would make more sense to me than thinking that someone thought this out.
Sat down and...
Because you couldn't. Again, because that's what I say, like, when people are, like, are going to be guests on Radio 8 Ball, and they're like, how can I prepare? I'm like, you can't. It's like, it's the one show you can't rehearse for, because
you don't know
the good parts. You won't even know the good parts while they're happening. The good parts are the parts that you aren't even aware of are happening, and that the listener later on is like, oh yeah, that person was going to get assassinated and they asked this question about da 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 da, or anyway, there's a lot of examples of that kind of thing happening. So what I'm going to ask about, maybe something about that dynamic, but it might be about the JFK assassination too. It might be about, I don't know. When we get there, we'll find out. Again, it's sort of like this. We're recording this months before that happens. So who knows? Who knows what the world will be like then and what will be on my mind. But one thing is for sure, is when that comes out, you'll still be putting out the Director's Wall, the podcast that you do with AJ Gonzalez, where you celebrate a filmmaker's entire career. You started off with M. Night Shyamalan. You're in the middle of looking at Francis Ford Coppola, and I love that podcast. It's I was talking with AJ Gonzalez recently. He's going to be a guest on an upcoming show. And I was telling him that whenever I listen to your podcast with him, it's not like I get jealous or competitive, but I always just feel like, damn, that show is so much better than ours. And then I was listening to him, and he was like, when we was talking to him, he's like, I have the exact same feeling when I listen to your podcast.
Yeah.
So
grass is always greener. It's.
Not for you. You're the one who's part of both. It's not like we were like two people who are like going out with the same person who are like, yeah, but at least Brian's great. And he's like, yeah, at least Brian's great on both. Oh, we love Brian so much.
Oh gosh.
His endearing laugh. Oh, we love him. He's the Mort Sahl of this project.
Too kind.
But I am curious. Have you considered doing a Director's Wall on William Asher?
Too much TV, man. I can't. It'll go on for a lifetime. I think we're going to definitely lean towards people that don't do a lot of TV because, one, it's hard to find that stuff, and we always want to do justice to the filmmaker and make sure we watch everything we can get. So, like, the idea of trying to figure out how do I get the Bad News Bears TV show, do I want to sit through that? Like, no, I don't want to do that. So I think if he was more movies than TV, then maybe it would be an interesting person to definitely try to figure out. But I think it's just too much television. unfortunately.
I don't know. That sounds like, it's one of those weird things where like, we're not going to hire you, but the reason isn't because you're bad. It's because, you just don't have the training that we, you're overqualified for the position.
Maybe.
You would never do, would you, okay, say if you just focused on William Asher's films, would you consider doing a William Asher director's wall?
Never.
No, okay. I got an honest answer out of you.
There's so many filmmakers in this world. I don't think we need to do William Asher. I think we did him justice with this episode. Good enough.
We certainly have. So if you have any thoughts about this, suggestions, ideas, things we missed, we love hearing from you. When we do, and you can reach out to us through our website at contact@theworldiswrongpodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram at theworldiswrongpodcast. You can also call Brian personally at this number. No, I'm not going to get that out. You can also find merchandise on our website. We'd love to see if you buy one of our T-shirts or our sweatshirts, take a picture, send it to us. We'll post it on Instagram. What else should I tell people before we get out of here, Brian?
I think we're good.
You sure? We didn't leave anything on the table. We didn't forget to.
Don't kill anybody off screen and tell me about it.
Or on, yeah. Well, I hope you enjoyed this podcast as much as we enjoyed making it. And until next time. Oh, wait, we forgot to tell you. What is next time? What are we going to be talking about in our next episode?
We are going to dive into the world of Tyler Perry with Temptation, Confessions of a Marriage Counselor.
Ooh.
Feeling dirty.
Yeah. Get ready for this. That's what we'll be doing next week on the World is Wrong podcast. And until that time, people, just remember, wherever you are, whenever you are, the world is wrong, and it's probably wrong about you.
This is the story of Johnny Cool. It tells the tale of his life. They say Johnny was meant to be and content to be mixed up in sorrow and strife. He lived by the gun and by the knife. Johnny Cool, Johnny Cool. He lived by the gun and by the knife. Johnny Cool. If you were friendly to Johnny Cool, you were just playing the fool. They say Johnny was friend to none, friend to only one. He went by this simple rule, that his only friend was Johnny Cool. Johnny Cool, Johnny Cool. Yes, his only friend was Johnny Cool. Johnny Cool. Johnny Cool. Because he thought life had abused him, he went on a murderous fling. But he didn't know that they used him like any old puppet on a string. Johnny Cool. Love never mattered to Johnny Cool. Each doll to him was the same, till one babe blinked her eyes at him, sighed some sighs at him, his icy heart turned to flame, and Johnny was never quite the same. Johnny Cool, Johnny Cool, Johnny Cool. One day they caught up with Johnny Cool, just like they promised they would. They left real fear of death in him, and some breath in him. They beat him till he understood. He paid for his evil ways, but good. And so ends the story of a fool. Johnny Cool. The fool that was known as Johnny Cool.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I'm AJ.
And we have a podcast called The Director's Wall,
examining a filmmaker's career, film by film. First up was M. Night Shyamalan, then Francis Ford Coppola. Who's next? Is there anything to this whole auteur theory? Find out on
The Director's Wall.
Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your preferred listening platform.